The national outcry over two deadly shootings in Minneapolis has drawn thousands of people to the sites where Renee Good and Alex Preddy were killed. Among the crowds yesterday, Senator Raphael Warnock, senior pastor at the Atlanta church once led by Martin Luther King Jr. He joined local faith leaders for a vigil, delivering this message.
As I stand where Alex Preddy lost his life in a real sense, I feel like I'm standing on holy ground. And the blood spilled on this ground reminds us that we're in a moral moment in our country. And the soul of our nation is at stake.
Joining us now, the Democratic Senator of Georgia and senior pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, Raphael Warnock. Thank you so much for being with us, Senator. And I can't imagine what it was like being there, but you've maybe had a little bit of time to process being there. What are your reflections today from visiting this site of where not only he was killed, but the memorial that has now sprung up to Alex Preddy?
Well, good to be here with you. There really are no words. It was a deeply moving experience. As I said, I felt like I was standing on holy ground. Alex Preddy's blood cries out to us. We are better than this. We can do better than this. I think of him, but not only him, but of Renee Good, who really lived up to her name, literally in the best of the civil rights tradition that has shaped me and shaped the church that I serve, where Dr. King served. These are folks who put their body on the line. And to have their own government kill them in this way and then try to malign their name is beyond appalling. We are in a crisis moment in our country. But what inspires me is that in the midst of the freezing cold of Minneapolis, ordinary citizens who understand that their neighbors' well-being is tied up with their own are standing up because they are feeling the fierce, howling winds that are blowing through our country right now. And that's a wind that is much harsher than the elements that we felt on the ground yesterday. And they're calling out for change. And as a senator representing the people of Georgia who's concerned about this show being taken on the road, I'm going to do everything I can to stop it.
The president of the Catholic Trinity University in D.C., Senator, wrote a powerful letter calling the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, quote, a true moral catastrophe, a depraved and lawless assault on human life, our Constitution, and the entire notion of the rule of law. The moral catastrophe is enmeshed in an official skein of lies and remarkable fabrications of truth we can see with our own eyes. You talk about the ordinary citizens that you saw yesterday. What can people do in a moment like this who feel the system is broken and in many cases, as our reporters have interviewed them, find themselves feeling broken as a result of what they're witnessing?
Well, I think as you look at the sheer scale of the Trump-Vance regime's operation in Minneapolis, it's clear to me that part of what they're trying to do is overwhelm people, to weaponize despair, to convince the citizens that you don't have a voice, that you cannot make a difference. But the people in Minneapolis, in real time, even in this dark moment, are showing that that's not true, that that's among the lies that they are telling. And they are shifting the narrative by continuing to stand day in and day out. They are using the instruments of democracy, the voices of people. They are bearing witness with cell phone cameras. And it is making a difference. Now, I'm not naive about what the Trump-Vance regime is up to. They would like to make a small change here or gesture there, and they're hoping that the people will let up. Well, I'm saying to the folks not only there, but all across the country, we cannot afford to let up. We need the voices of the people now more than ever to pull us back from the brink and to make sure that we have a democracy here for our children.
And those folks have been showing up across the country. Let's talk about Congress now. Senator, you're one of the Democratic senators who has publicly come out in favor of blocking funding for DHS. And I want to play what Majority Leader John Thune is saying as that partial government shutdown deadline nears.
The question is, what is it the Democrats want? And if they can find that, then we should figure out if there's a way to actually achieve it or come to some agreement, if you will, through negotiating whatever their demands are. But I think we need to know what those are, what that universe is.
Can you talk about what the Democrats want to see? Can you give an answer to Leader Thune? And do you believe that there is a way to find some commonality with the Republicans?
Well, you know, I hear my friend John Thune, you know, say that I want to know what their demands are. Well, other than being the majority leader, guess what? He's a citizen. And I'd like to know if he's okay with what all of us are seeing with our own eyes. This is not a partisan issue. This is a moral issue. This is about who we are as a nation. This is about whether we are a democracy or are we a place where ordinary citizens are just under the thumb of government. And so, you know, that kind of response, you know, suggests that this is our problem. This is an American problem. And so whether we go into a shutdown is in his hands, the hands of his caucus, I'm not okay with what I'm seeing. And I think there are a lot of Republicans and independents, as well as Democrats, who are not okay seeing officers shoot a citizen in the back who was brandishing nothing more than a cell phone, trying to bear witness and record what their government was up to. And so I'm ready for that conversation, but I will block any funding for ICE until we come up with some reasonable measures of addressing what we're seeing in real time. This is a moral catastrophe, and people ought to be concerned, and that concern ought not be based on whether you have a D or an R in front of your name.
As you probably know, during a town hall last night, a man rushed to the lectern where Ilhan Omar was speaking about this very topic and sprayed her with an unknown liquid. And President Trump's response to that was, quote, "She probably had herself sprayed knowing her." What's your reaction to that?
Well, this is the kind of awful gaslighting we see time and time again from Donald Trump. She had herself sprayed, and if you listen to the administration, Alex Preddy and Renee Good had themselves shot to death. This is unacceptable. It's deeply appalling. It's bigger than politics. And I would call on Americans, everyday people, whether you see yourself as a Democrat or Republican or an independent, to summon what Abraham Lincoln called the angels of our nature, and to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we really are one people. And I think that there are those who are trying to divide us to make Representative Omar something other than a citizen, a human being. And so we're better than this. And all elected officials should be concerned when we see this kind of thing. And the presidency deserves better than what we're seeing and hearing from Donald Trump.
Senator Raphael Warnock, thank you.